Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing this mystical mountain scene intermediate level. Alright, hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. We're going to be doing this scene and I'm drawing a circle. I know a couple of people when they've tried something like this before, they say, why can't I just paint on a circular paper? But I do have some pieces that kind of overflow outside the circle. So I'm tracing a circle just a little bit smaller than the size of my paper. I found a piece of paper that actually fit the shape. I would say just find something. It could be a bowl, a plate, something that just fits. You don't have to actually go out and buy some stencils. Uh, Chances are there's something in your house somewhere you can use. And then I'm making my moon. I'm using a chapstick. I completely believe in trying to utilize what you have in the house to create these stencils. And then I'm drawing my mountain peak. Mountains are great because you don't have to be a great drawer to be able to draw them. It's just basically a mishappen upside down V. And I'm putting some peaks in there. You could do whatever you like, of course. You could do multiple peaks, but I do like that one central peak in the middle there. And then sketching out my river. So again, you don't have to be a good drawer to do these. Uh, but if you still feel uncomfortable with the drawing, you could use a light box. You could put up to a window. There is creative ways to do these sketches. So I'm doing, I don't know why I'm focusing so much on this one area here. I usually just sketch it out really fast, but I am doing a river. I'm putting some bends in there, which rivers don't necessarily have, but they do sometimes have. So it's up to you again if you want to put that river in there. So I'm starting off with the sky. I'm going to do a wet on wet here. So I'm tracing around the moon carefully with water and be liberal with the water. I always tell people less is not more when it comes to water for the most part, especially for wet on wet. When I'm teaching these classes, and I've been really fortunate these last few months since I've moved to New England. I have definitely upped how many classes I'm teaching. I mean, it's just been crazy. I don't know what it is about New England, but they love their classes, which I, of course, love. And one thing I've noticed I've had to tell people over and over again because it's a new medium for a lot of people is use more water. So be liberal. And then this is something that if you don't use the Dr. Peach Martin watercolors like I use, pretty much 99.9% of my videos are going to be using these watercolors because that's pretty much all I use. It might be a little bit harder to get these vibrant colors. I will put a link below for the colors I've used in here. You could buy them one off. You don't have to buy a whole set. You could also buy the smaller ones from me on my website. But if you're using a regular palette, I don't know how many layers you're going to have to do to get these vibrant colors. So this is really kind of it helps to have these watercolors. They're liquid, they're concentrated, so you drop them in. They're very vibrant, as you can see. So once I made it wet, I just dropped in the colors, which is kind of my technique I use for all these galaxy sky type scenes. And I'm just going to swirl it all together. So I use like a black, blue, a purple, um, and the green. I think it's a tallow. I know it's a tallow green. It's a purple, and I want to say it's a true blue, and then of course the black. I know a lot of watercolors will tell you you never have to use white or black. I am not one of those people. I believe in white and black paints when it comes to watercolors. I use them very frequently. In fact, I always buy the bigger bottles of them because I do use them quite a bit. I don't know why they don't like using black and white. I'm not one that watches a ton of tutorials, mostly because I like what I like. So I know that's kind of hypocritical considering you're watching a tutorial right now. But if you don't like following all the rules, then I'm your girl. That's probably why my tagline on my channel is the not so serious watercolor artist. So I'm just kind of blending these all together to create this galaxy effect. I will go back over this later on and add quite a bit more colors. I would say be careful with how much white you use, because it does, as you can see here, it is muting out quite a bit of it. And I do go back through later and add another layer just to make it a little bit more vibrant. But the white's really cool if you're doing a galaxy effect, which I'm going to be doing another video on that here soon, because I'm teaching a class on it tomorrow and I'm going to have to create a video for it. So I'm going to make it also available on my YouTube channel. But I do create that kind of galaxy effect with the white in between the colors. If you see a lot of these galaxies have that kind of whitish look to it, you know, like the Milky Way. So that's where the white really comes in handy. But here I'm just kind of playing with it until I get the consistency that I'm looking for. And I apologize if I sound a little nasally. I've been really, really battling allergies here the last few weeks. I don't know what I'm allergic to. It's winter here, so I don't know what is blooming. We're guessing it's some sort of mold or something that I'm allergic to, because it seems to kick up anytime it snows or rains, which is fun. But it's gotten better, surprisingly. Like yesterday was miserable, but it's gotten better. I've been dealing with sinus migraines. Fun stuff. Do you guys have any allergies? If you don't, I'm jealous. I forgot what it's like not to have allergies. I feel like I'm allergic to air. um, but as you can see, I just keep messing with it, and in hindsight, I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh, stop using so much white. That's what your issue is. Which, you know, I think people, a lot of times, and I see this in my classes, they're like, oh, it's not turning out right. Yours is so perfect. And of course, it's not. Mine is never perfect. It's never close to perfect. I see a million mistakes in what I'm doing, and I learn from them. So that's kind of what's happening here. So if you ever feel that way, just feel confident knowing that you are not alone. That I don't think any of us ever really come away with our artwork feeling like it turned out exactly how we wanted it. It's rare that I walk away, I'm like, wow, that came out better than I ever hoped. So, and I mean, I have goals with my work, like, oh, I want to paint this. This is my goal. And I challenge myself with certain pieces, and oftentimes, you know, it'll come out. I'm like, okay, I did better than I thought I would, but not as good as I hoped. So, you know, that's common. So I think at this point I'm like, what is happening? I didn't want to edit this out because I wanted you guys to just see that it takes a little bit to kind of get to where you want it to be. Sometimes you'll get it right away. I just took a cloth and pressed against my artwork, and I was like, I need to just kind of start over again. Sometimes, and when I teach these galaxy classes, they're so fun because at first it's a really cool effect when you drop this watercolor in like this, right? So it's a really cool effect when that happens. And people usually have this, you know, if it's wet on wet and then they put that first drop in and they see it bleed, I always get that reaction. Oh, ooh, ah, I love it. And I think that's what makes watercolor fun. Where was I going with this? Oh, so a lot of times, especially for my new artists, like this is literally their first watercolor they've ever done, they get the effect right away. So I have to kind of step in and be like, okay, stop, you got it. And they just look at me like, really, that fast? That's not often the case, but if it happens and you get it right away, stop. If it's exactly what you want to look like, it's better to come back later and say, okay, maybe I can add on a little bit more color. You can't do that to too much of an effect because obviously it's watercolor, it's not as forgiving. You know, so that's that. I'm using a Hansa yellow light here. And again, I'll link these colors down below, but this is, I love this yellow because it almost has a fluorescent feel to it. So if you're doing like lights, like the lights at night or something, and you want to create that glow, I love using a, like, obviously for the white, you use the white of the paper, but I also like adding this Hansa yellow kind of on that outer edge to give that yellow look. And then I also add the, um, I'm blanking out on the name right now, the gamboge, which is that more orangey yellow kind of outside of it, and it creates a really cool effect. So right now I am basically creating the shadows in the mountains. I'm just using my brush, and the way to do this is you have to use kind of the whole head of the brush. So I use the tip of the brush to create that kind of sharp dark point there, but to blend it out, you press your brush down and kind of use your whole brush to to push it out. Um, I'm going to do a little bit here. So you can see the bottom part of that is blended out a little bit. That's because I'm pressing the side of my brush down. I'm using the brush to blend it out because most of your paint's going to be concentrated on the tip of your brush. And then when you press it down using the side of it, that's where it automatically naturally blends out because your paint are most concentrated in the tip, and then it obviously becomes less and less concentrated. So I'm using that weight of the paint on my brush to create that blend, if that makes sense. And I'm using a mix of a black and the blues that are on my palette. So that's kind of what you're going to be doing. So if you're at this point, if you're saying, what's that blue color? When you were mixing your galaxy earlier, you're going to have a mix of these colors on your palette. Use those colors to bring it through the rest of the mountain. It's more of a whimsical scene, so I'm not necessarily looking for it to look exactly right. These colors may not make a ton of sense, but we are going for a little bit more whimsical. And you could go crazy with the colors. I'm all for it. I love when people go rogue with their colors and just go crazy. I mean, you can make your mountain pink for all I care, and I love it. The brush I'm using is a silver brush, and if you're in any kind of watercolor groups, like on Facebook or something, I always see people commenting about these silver brushes. They're like, I don't understand what the hype is with them. Uh, it's really, I didn't either, and then now it's all I use. So they hold a ton of paint and water, um, which for something like this comes in handy. So it takes a minute. It's a acquired taste, but then you end up, like me, probably ending up loving it once you get used to it. So I'm adding yellows. I'm just putting a little yellow in the base of the mountain. Um, and if you're doing this tutorial along with me, it might help to take a picture of or screenshot the picture, maybe in the intro, so you can reference it, just to see where we're at. I always tell people in my classes, take a picture of the painting and then you can reference it, and you can also enlarge it. Gotta love technology. I'm also putting the shadows of the trees and the mountains, the trees that are not there yet. I'm putting the shadows or the reflections into the water. There are no trees yet, but we have the reflection in there. That's the magic of art. I have the reflections before I have the trees up. Um, Mostly because I knew what I was going for. So I knew what I was going to have painted, so I put in the reflections. You could do this later on if you want. I'm doing it now because I'm waiting for the base of my mountain to dry. So I figured move on to another part of the painting. I added that yellow there. It's one of those things. It's a whimsical mountain. I'm going to have a lot of colors happening. This one's going to take quite a bit of time. I think it took me originally about 2 hours to paint, so I edited out about an hour's worth of this, and it's still quite a bit. Um, I could probably have edited out a lot more, but there are so many different little steps to this. And like I said, this is more of an intermediate because there are quite a few techniques in here. To create this reflections of the tree or trees in general, I'm using the brush itself again, the tips of the brush, and then just kind of pulling it down. And This is what I'm calling intermediate, is because I'm not going into each of these techniques. I'm not showing you the blending and the trees and all that stuff. Uh, so there are ways to learn each of these things that I'm doing on this painting, and I would, of course, suggest if this is your first painting, go for it, try it. You may have a natural ability to figure it out, but if you're getting frustrated, there are other videos, mine, other tutorials that'll go through each one of these techniques, and then maybe come back to this. But like I said, I'm all for whatever you want to do. I'm all for supporting that. Um, I'm using a mix of a green here. When I say I'm going to put all of the colors, probably not all of them, the more of the sky colors, but this is an olive green I'm using from Dr. P.H. Martin and mixed with the black. Um, I love the olive green. It is a concentrated watercolor. It's not their hydras, so the concentrated are a little bit more transparent. They are not, oops, I just bumped the microphone. Apologies. They are not light fast, and they are, but I find that it's fine to mix a concentrated in with the hydras if you're looking for longevity with your artwork. With that said, I haven't had an issue with even my concentrated watercolors fading, uh, even in the Arizona sun. So, I mean, if you stuck my painting out in the sun outside in Arizona, I'm sure it's going to fade. But, I mean, everything fades, even dyed fabric. Like, there's just, the Arizona sun is just like that. So, I'm not sure that's a good benchmark for light fast or not, but I guess it is. If a paint doesn't fade in the Arizona sun, then that would definitely be the ultimate light fast color. But I haven't had any issues with it myself. But if that's something that you're worried about, then mixing the two sometimes helps. So I'm creating the black at the bottom here of these, where the land meets the water, to create that contrast. And I found that a lot of people, and I feel like I'm calling people out when I say this. I'm not. I'm just trying to see what I see as a common thing that is easily fixed that people don't see, I guess. I'm not trying to call people out, just using my experience from teaching classes to help. Is I've seen when they paint where, let's say, land meets water like this, I've seen where they'll keep it the same color tone throughout, and it doesn't create that contrast and that black at that base there, or even a dark brown or a dark green, whatever you're using to create that darkness where it meets, helps create that dimensional look of the painting. So it's really important to do, and it's a very easy thing to do to fix a painting to make it look more dimensional. So if you think your artwork's maybe looking a little flat, this might be something to give a try too. So hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, I've been dealing with allergies and feeling quite loopy with all the meds that I've been taking. I was gonna do this voiceover yesterday, but yeah, that was not happening. I was 100% not functioning, but so I'm just doing a mess of painting here. You need zero skills to be able to do this thing. It's just literally I'm scribbling paint colors onto here. Whimsical. We're going for whimsical. Things don't have to make sense for it to make sense. Maybe that should be my tagline. Things don't have to make sense for them to make sense. Make sense of that. You're probably thinking, wow, I think your meds are still kicked in. So I'm creating a kind of like a, when you see a mountain, they tend to have other mountain ranges in front of them. Unless it's like Mount Kilimanjaro, right, where it's just like, bam, mountain. So I'm trying to create that kind of effect of hills, like layers of hills, before it goes into this really majestic mountain peak. So this is creating kind of that effect. This is why I was waiting for that area to dry first, because it would just bleed into each other and I wouldn't have those peaks. So I'm just trying to create that effect, like there's hills in the distance and trees and, maybe some fog. I'm using my painting kind of where it looks like it needs something. So that's why I never sketched this part out, because I'm just looking to see, okay, like right there, that kind of didn't make any sense on the painting, so I'm just gonna put a mountain range in there to make it make more sense. Um, so this is where you're going to be looking more at your own painting versus mine to see where you just need to fill in the gaps, because you don't want to follow mine exactly, because water does its thing and it's going to do its thing differently every single time. And I left a little bit of that light color in between because I think it gives it that kind of foggy look to it. And now I'm just doing a little bit more of the grassy area. Again, colors. I'm using a lot of different colors because I'm going for this whimsical, mystical scene. If if you're going for that, then just add all the colors in. I'm using like fun blues and greens and oranges and yellows and purples, just all the bright colors, and just creating this effect. If you had this like really beautiful, vibrant galaxy reflecting onto the trees and the grass, I imagine that this is what it would look like. So I'm just filling this part in here. So I'm just going to be pulling this closer to the edge of that circle there. This is where I'm going to actually kind of make it overlap, like it's spilling over this circle. And so I'm using more of this like the tallow green and blues, and it's going to kind of look like it's, how do I describe this? I mean, you can kind of see what I'm talking about, but just like it's this peephole and you have this painting kind of spilling over. Hopefully that makes sense. I mean, you could probably see it more than you can understand it, but now I'm creating these like leaf effects as well. I'll link a video I did below that kind of talks about the easiest way to do these leaves and blades of grass and stuff using your brush. It's actually one of my beginner classes. It's really easy to do once you figure out how to use the brush a little bit better. Of course, if you're watching this and you're more of an intermediate, you already know what you're doing and you're like, why are you explaining this to me? But if you just happen to be watching this video and you want to learn, I will put the link below for that video. So I'm just creating this effect, and I want it to kind of go a little bit down, but also a little bit up. So I don't want it to be a jarring effect, and it'll make more sense when you see the final painting. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then this water part at the bottom, I didn't draw that bottom part of the circle because I wanted the water to kind of end there without a solid line. So it's not a full circle drawing. I'm adding some trees in right now because, you know, mountain scene, forest, so I'm putting some trees. I purposely wanted to go over this yellow part because it creates that really stark contrast that's really vibrant and beautiful. And, you know, just wanted to add some trees. Kind of what Bob Ross says, right? Happy trees. So I don't know what kind of trees these are. I mean, I know they're forest trees, but I don't know what they are. The ones with the branches that go up. You could do branches that are kind of cascading, however you want to do your trees. I'm just doing these trees. I'm not using black. I'm using the same kind of tallow green. It looks black probably. You might be able to see a little bit of that blues and greens there, but I didn't want it to be black because I wanted to have a little bit of the effect of just, you kind of see the colors at an angle thing. I think it just makes it a little bit more whimsical when you can do that. So and I literally just mix my colors. Like, I don't do a perfect mix. I would put the blues and the greens next to each other. I dip my brush in both, and they both end up on the painting. So it's a really fun effect to do. But I wanted to create this effect of these trees and the water framing the mountain. So it's going to be wrapping around. And I'm letting the green and blue dry below, so I can add a little bit more of the blades of grass to make it stand out a little bit more. So you can see the blue for sure now that I did. And again, it looks really, really dark, almost black. I'm going for that. And it's going to be another ridge off on the side with the trees, again, so that it really makes that mountain kind of look like it's further in the distance, but also shows how big that mountain is, that mountain peak, because you've got these ridges and stuff in the front. So it really helps give that illusion that it is off in the distance. I recently saw somebody do a painting, and they were doing a lighthouse, and the lighthouse was, it looked like it was right next to a tree. So the lighthouse itself was, it looked like it was about an inch tall, and the tree was this big tree. And a lot of that is just, I knew what she was going for, and she was like, I don't know what's going on here. I know what I'm going for. And it was really just, I was like, you just have to kind of make that tree base go past the paper, because it didn't look like it was, it looked like it was right next to it. So a lot of times it's just figuring out where the base of the tree is. Like here, I didn't draw the trees all the way to the bottom of the paper. It's hidden behind this ridge. I'm kind of babbling at this point. Hopefully you know what I'm trying to say. But you can also see where I was saying I had my blue and my green mixed together, but not perfectly mixed. So you can see where sometimes the green pops out a little bit more so than the blue. And that's, again, because I just literally dipped my brush in both colors and I didn't mix them together. So one will pop out more than the other. So that's more of a technique you see in acrylic, more so than watercolor. So maybe it's something I brought into my watercolors from my acrylic and oil painting days. It might be one that a watercolorist is looking at right now, like, why are you doing that? That's awful. It's not a rule. But again, ignorance is bliss, right? So I have no idea if this is something watercolorists do or if they're not allowed to do, but I'm doing it. So, there you go. I don't care what the rules are. I just want my painting to be my painting. So I'm doing a little bit more of the leaves now, or the grass blades, a little bit of the grass blades and leaves, I guess you could say. So you can see it a little bit now, what I was talking about, but I will, of course, go back to this as it dries, and a little bit more, add a little bit more, add a little bit more. That's the theme of today's tutorial, is to keep adding on layers. But if you notice that I really started with the light stuff first, and then I start adding in the darkness. Now I have the trees going off more into the distance, layers of trees, and as that background dried, you can kind of see now the effect that I was going for. It's starting to come together, right? Now you're starting to see, oh, okay, I can kind of see what we're going for now. And we're a little over halfway through the painting. And I'm just adding this contrasty in the middle. I'm trying to decide where I'm going to put more trees here. It's like, I don't want it to be perfectly balanced, because then that doesn't look really realistic. The other reason you want to wait until it dries is so that you can do what I'm doing here and put your hand on the paper. I don't always do this, and I usually end up regretting not doing it, waiting until it dries, because then I end up with smudge marks on my painting, and then I'm trying to figure out what to do. I recently painted a black cat. It was like a month ago. I painted a black cat for somebody, and I just did not wait for it to dry, and it became messy. And I ended up giving this black cat this kind of foggy bluish background because there were so many smudge marks on it, and ended up really liking the way it looked. I was like, oh, that actually came out really cool. So, as Bob Ross says, happy accidents. There's always happy accidents when it comes to me painting. And so, speaking of this galaxy, so I taught this class. We did the Northern Lights art, and the Northern Lights is the same effect as I do my galaxy, which is you do wet on wet technique, and then you drop in the colors from Dr. Paige Martin. So, I teach this class, and I can only teach it has to be a smaller class, because it's a lot more hands-on for me teaching this class. But I asked people, okay, what color Northern Lights do you want? I give them the colors, and they kind of drop the paints in the kind of direction they want this Northern Lights to do. I'll do a tutorial on it here soon, because a lot of people liked it. So I'll do a tutorial. It's one you really need the Dr. Paige Martin paints for, though, to really work the way I do it. I'm sure other people, watercolors, have done tutorials with regular watercolors, but uh, it's really one that you need those paints. And I don't know where I was going with this, but anyways, so and so you just really have to um, see where the paint kind of guides you, and that was kind of the theme, because this one lady kept she would do it and then she would over manipulate it and it ended up being muddy, and I kept saying, you've got to let it go, you've got to stop, let it dry. And she kept trying to fix it, and it's like, well, it's not acrylic, it's watercolor, so you've got to let it dry before you can fix it, because otherwise they just all blend together. um, so so she would paint the whole paper and it wouldn't be what she wanted, and she would take her paper towel and dab the whole thing, so she would try to start over. So finally I said, okay, you've got to trust me with this. I am one with these watercolors, so just trust me on this, because I normally try to let people, I try to guide when I'm teaching these classes. I try to guide a little bit, but I also try to let the student discover things themselves. I kind of just like nudge them in the right direction, because I feel like that's how I learn. If I experience it and learn it and do it myself, I learn a lot more. Um, and and this was one of those cases where I was like, okay, I've got to step in. So she did finally. I think it was like the fifth time she did it, and I saw what the watercolors were doing, and I saw that it was going to work. But I could see from her perspective, she was only seeing what was in front of her, because she's never worked with these watercolors before, or watercolors in general. So she didn't know what the end result was going to be. So I said, okay, this is where you've got to trust me a little bit. I said, your painting is beautiful, but you're only halfway through it. And I think that's what happens with watercolor artists, is when we start this medium, we get halfway through the painting and we're like, oh, this doesn't look right. And a lot of that is just, you've got to keep painting. So finally she did this first layer, and I knew it was going to work for her, but she didn't see that, so I took the painting away from her. I literally took it away. I'm like, I'm going to take this away from you so you can't stare at it anymore. And and I'll tell people, just take a 5 to 10 minute break, let it dry, go get some coffee, whatever it is during your class. Use this time to refresh your water. Use this time to maybe look at your neighbor's artwork. But take a step away. And most of the time people listen, but she was just so focused on how her painting wasn't working that I actually just had to take it away from her. And I was a little nervous because I'm like, I don't know if she's really, because I could tell she was frustrated. And um, I took the painting away because I was like, okay, I've got to step in. She's frustrated. She's not seeing this. Let me help her. So I finally took the painting away and gave it back to her once it dried. And she still wasn't seeing it, again, because we're only halfway through. We only have that first layer of watercolor done. And she wasn't seeing it because she doesn't know what the watercolors are going to do. And a lot of times that's what you have to do with these paintings. You kind of have to watch these tutorials and stop halfway through and look at the painting that the instructor is doing and see what it looks like halfway completed, and see that, oh, okay, I can see it's not done yet. So I took it away, I let it dry, and then I brought the painting back to her. And like I said, the Northern Lights one is one where the paint really guides itself. You kind of have to see what the paint's doing. And I showed her and I said, okay, look at this smudge mark here, right? We'll call it a smudge mark or blob, whatever it is. This looks like this would be a good place for a tree or a mountain. So once I took it away and showed her again, I was like, let's look at the painting. Let's see what the painting's telling us. Then she started to see it, and it ended up being one of the most prettiest paintings I've seen a student do. And she ended up framing it. She showed me a picture like less than a week later. She framed it and she hung it up on her wall. And it was probably one of my happiest results, because it went from she was so frustrated with it to she was so proud of it. She actually framed it. And a lot of it's just letting the painting guide you. Let the paints guide you. And with watercolor, you kind of have to let it go with the flow. So I've just been filling up this background, but to create this kind of layer where this tallow green and blue pops a little bit, I did add a white paint to it. So that white paint is opaque, And I'm not using the bleed proof white. I do use a bleed proof white in here at some point. I'm not doing that here. I'm using actual white paint. Because a white paint, so the white you have to be careful with because it can make things look muddy. But that's kind of what I'm going for here because I want it to stand apart from the background a bit. I want it to just be very vivid. So I did add a little white to that green to make it kind of stand apart. And that tallow green is such a vibrant color anyways that it can handle it. There's other colors that maybe can't handle it so well, but it works for this. So I'm just adding this spillover of the ferns and the leaves and the grass here so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. So blues, greens, purples. This is so if you think about a peacock, like the peacock colors, kind of the color theme going on here. Um, so which I always think is such a gorgeous color combination. But blues, greens, purples, golds, yellows, and uh, just layering upon layering. There's that dark line contrast I was talking about earlier. I'm making it even darker at this point just to make it look more dimensional. I added those oranges and yellows to create that kind of glow from that yellows in the sky, so it's all kind of bouncing off of each other, and just really, this is kind of where I'm putting in those final touches to really help the painting pop. And like I said, I do go back and I fix the sky a little bit. That's going to happen too because I'm looking at this at this point and I'm like, you know what? It's just not vibrant. So this is where you're looking at your painting and just saying, where do I need to fill in some spots? Where do I need more contrast? And so that's what you're doing. So now you can kind of see what I'm talking about with that spillage from the painting overlapping the, or the scene overlapping the painting. So it kind of falls out a little bit of the picture, like you're looking through a peephole. So that's you can see that a lot more now. I'm adding a lot more contrast. This is kind of my, so I've seen people say, what's your style? What's your painting styles? I think this is kind of my painting style, is that I do tend to go a lot more contrasty with my artwork. So I love the lights and the darks. Even photography I love. When I look at people's pictures, I really tend to like the ones that have a lot of contrast in them. So it's just my style or my taste. You might like a little bit more subtle. I'm fast forwarding through this point. I sped myself up. This is not obviously how fast I paint. Can you imagine? So I'm just adding in some details so you guys can see. That's why I'm speeding it up. Sometimes it's easier to see things when you speed it up. And adding some trees now onto those ridges. And I'm going to blend out that bottom into the ridges so you can see it a lot more like it's part of the mountain. So this is where you get those layers, and I'm really just looking at it at this point like, okay, where do I need more? And like I said, I didn't want the trees to be perfectly balanced, so I put a little bit more on the right than the left. And rarely is nature asymmetrical like that, right? There's usually some variable to symmetry. So I like it to look a little more organic. If you're going for perfectly balanced, go for perfectly balanced. That's your style. And my goal is when you guys paint these tutorials is for your own styles to come through, for your own taste to come through. I don't want you to duplicate exactly what I'm doing. I want you guys to kind of discover your own style through this, and maybe use me more as a muse or an inspiration instead of a step-by-step tutorial. I just added a touch of gray to the moon, obviously because moon's not perfectly white. It has its own mountains and stuff. And I added a little bit more of a ridge to the front of the mountain because it was just very white at one point. So I added a little bit of that light blue. It's like a washed out turquoise to give that snow effect. And now I'm just doing, adding more contrast to my mountain. Contrast, that's the word of the day, apparently, to make it pop. And the other thing too is that when the paint's wet, it is a lot more contrasty, and then it dries. I'm like, okay, I want that effect back, so I'll go back and add another layer. And that's kind of what's happening. I'm like, okay, it dried. I still want that contrast back, so I'm going to go ahead and add another layer to that. And just looking to see where the mountain looks like it needs a little bit more oomph to fix it. I like my nail polish color here, but I don't remember what nail polish I'm wearing. I know, I'm at the point, we're at that point in the video where I'm starting to notice other things. This is also a silver brush I'm using, but it's my smaller one. So I think I used other brushes, but the silver brushes, because they hold so much paint, really help. So this is where I said I'm going to adjust the sky. So I wanted it to be more bright and less of that white look. I wanted it more of the colors. So I'm like, okay, let me make this a little less of a washed out sky. I wanted more of the bright colors, but I still add my white. You know, it's funny because I've learned since this painting, less white, more colors. I also was kind of at this point, I was like, ooh, that makes it look like the moon is in front of the sky, and it should never be in front of the sky because moon is off in the distance. So I think at this point I was like, oh, that's not right. But I went back to fix it. So I'm kind of, like I said, I'm trying to figure this out as I go. This is one of the first galaxy skies I did, I guess. I've done a few before this, but this is one where I was like really going for that effect. And I've done so many since then, between my classes and tutorials that I've taught here locally, that I've really kind of gotten the hang of it a little bit more. So I think that's a good time for me to say, let me do Northern Lights. I did a Northern Lights tutorial before. There is one, but I've done better since then. So I'm gonna do a new one. You guys will probably like it a lot better. It's a lot easier to do than what I did with my tutorial. It's a much easier process than what I originally did. But as you can see here, I am adding more colors. I'm like, okay, I need more color, less white. So I added more of that blue. It's such a pretty blue too. It's such a perfect blue for this effect, which that tallow green is part of it, but this is that blue tramarine. And if you were to look at the bottle, the tallow green and the blue tramarine that I mentioned, they're both hydrous. But if you look at the blue on the bottle, it has more of a purpley look to it, but as you can see, it's blue. So the labels on the Dr. P.H. Martin bottles they reflect the color that they are. And in this case, I think it's one of the few times where the color is not really that accurate. So as you can see, now we go to the bleed proof white. So bleed proof white is, again, Dr. P.H. Martin. I will put a link below for that. So I'm taking a dotting tool to create these dots. I don't know what else I was trying to call it. It's kind of like, I guess you could say they might be fireflies, but I'm just going for that whimsical look. So you've got like these floating orbs or fireflies or fairies, whatever it is, or the pollen that's reflected in the light. Whatever you want this to be, whatever works for you is what it is. But I'm just creating a little bit more of this with that. The bleed proof white I use quite a bit, especially with stars. So I like using them, but you have to use it towards the end of the painting because it is very opaque. You can paint on top of it, but it's not recommended. It's not often you'll see me recommend painting over it. There are a couple times where the trick I'm going for requires you to do that, but not often. Certainly not in this case. I want those white dots to stand out. I use them a lot for stars. I've seen a lot of people, you'll see a lot of tutorials where they take a toothbrush or the brush and flick the white onto the painting. I like more control over my painting, so I don't do that. But it is certainly a quicker way to do it. You can get smaller dots doing that and a lot more spray, but and if you were to do that on this painting, you would just basically, take a piece of paper and cover the areas you don't want that to be on. Just hold it over, hover it over your painting and flick. I'm not sure how well you can do that here. I know I've seen a lot of artists that their paintings rely on stuff like that. They actually have a cutout stencil so that they can get that exactly right. Uh, you see them a lot with like street artists that do spray painting and stuff as their art. They'll do the same because they're, like if you go to Venice Beach in California, any of these places that do something like that, they're doing the same kind of painting over and over and over again. So yeah, they have these stencils cut out. So in this case, they would have, the mountain and the water cut out, and they would just have this one section. They would spray it because they're going for speed. They're not going for, they're not trying to spend hours on one painting because they're, turn and burn type of artwork. Still really beautiful, fascinating to watch. That's the other thing too. These street artists are doing it because they know they have their audience attention right then and there, and they've got to get it done quickly because people have short attention span, especially if they're walking around, they're on vacation. So they're adapting, but I don't have to worry about that here. So I can use my dotting tool, make my stars and my fireflies come together as slow as I want them to. And for this, you want to fill in the dark parts of the sky with the stars. That really makes that lighter part pop out. And, you could see how when I added that blue, I didn't mess with it as much, and it kind of created this really cool effect. So that's what those Northern Lights tend to do. And like I said, you have to use Dr. P.H. Martin paints to do it the way I do it, because I don't know how to do it another way. That's just how it rolls. So we're just adding these stars. It's the last touch to the painting, and then you're going to be done at that point. This is one of my favorite paintings. It sold rather quickly. It sold a while ago. I obviously did this tutorial a long time ago. But the lady who bought it, it was really cool. She kind of just stared at it for a while, and she's like, wow, this is just really speaking to me. And she bought it, and it was on her birthday. So I do remember the people who buy my paintings. Like, I may not remember their names or anything, but I do remember those moments. I also remember what podcast I'm listening to when I'm painting. So I think that having that visual, if you're a visual person, you could probably relate to that. So I look at a painting, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember the story I was listening to. It's always true crime. What do you guys listen to when you're painting? Do you listen to other tutorials? Do you listen to music? Do you not listen to anything? Do you watch TV? I don't watch TV because I have to watch my painting. But that kind of gives you an idea. But here it is. Voila, the final painting. Let me know what you guys think yourself.